Hello everyone, it's Miss Darling in the studio, and continuing on with this theme of masterboards. This time I want to discuss tribal masterboards, tribal journals, ethnic, whatever word you use. It conveys kind of an African type feeling, maybe mixed with some other motifs or whatever, but overall the idea is tribal. So I want to first show you a few examples of journals that I've completed recently in different sizes and styles, so you can get an idea of different ways that you can interpret this theme. And then we'll look at some handmade papers that I made, and I'll show you, a bunch of examples of those, and then we'll actually play around and make a masterboard of the tribal theme. So my first example is this journal. It's 8.5 by 5.5. The cover is fabric. It's muslin, and I use black Posca pens to make the vertical pattern on part of the fabric, and then I glued another piece of fabric down on top of that for a focal point. And then on the interior, I think that when you say tribal, most people tend to think of animal print, and I didn't want to do something that was just sheer animal print. It just is too expected. There's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of it now, but it's just what you expect to see, and I don't want any of my journals to have a feeling of expectation. But you can see that my opening cover to the signature is, of course, an animal print. Here in the background is a print I made using the pens, and you can see there's a cluster here with a pebble hand sewn onto it. So let's just briefly run through this. Another cluster. This as well is handmade design. Here is it's a motif that I made out of pen. I believe I made that into a stamp. That's why I'm a little bit confused. But yeah, that's a stamp, handmade stamp. And you can see I coffee dyed the papers. Here's another handmade stamp. This was handmade design paper. It has a animal print vibe to it, but it is not it is not an actual animal print. Another handmade design, as well as this, is one of my Japanese calligraphy stamps. You can see there's plenty of space for journaling. This again is a handmade background, as is that. Now a lot of these are prints made from the original, and so that's why the originals are actually black on white, but then by double printing the paper I can get a dark brown background and then do the black design on top, and that's what you're seeing here. So I've got a lot of my handmade stamps. Again, it's this is kind of a very popular design motif that you will find in African fabrics and other types of designs on their pottery and whatnot. And so I have a full sheet I made of that. More vertical stripes. This is the reverse of the original. So we got the white on a black background, but the original is the reverse of that. This was made with a hand stamp I made. Another ethnic tribal type motif. Okay, and then the we're now on the reverse side of the signature, and so you see a lot of the patterns being, you're seeing the other side of the masterboard. Here's a cluster made with raffia and some burlap in the background. So you see, this is one kind of interpretation, another cluster, and so that was fun. This one's fairly similar yet different. And again, I'm staying with the tribal theme. But this one has some computerized paper of an African design nature. And so you can see that there's a similarity there, but yet it is definitely different. This was one of my designs, as was this. So this has more of my handmade designs, just different ones from the other journal. Again, some burlap clusters, and I may have showed this one briefly in a previous video. This one includes some coffee dyed postcards with a collage design on the back of it. Here's some more motifs just glued on to another. That was a print from something I had purchased, a kit I had purchased, and looks like watercolor. It was probably done on a jelly plate. So you see there's variety. Not everything is strictly African, but gives you kind of like an ode to an animal print there. Here's some other types of motifs thrown in. A lot of coffee dyed places to journal. Another postcard. Okay, so that's similar yet different. And the cover here, we've got some bark papers that I've had in my studio for years and years, and I cut a few pieces there along with the fabric. And here's more of the bark up here. Here's a large, this is an 8.5 by 11. Let me back out a little bit. This is actual African dyed fabric. There's two of them there. This is one up here, and then this is a second one down here. And that's glued onto mat board for the cover, which is a little bit thicker than cardstock and very sturdy. And here, of course, is an African design printed off. And then this one has a lot of, very heavily coffee dyed paper. Here's an ornament from a necklace I made. And so here, all the designs are essentially printed for a full sheet of paper, because that's the nature of this journal. And we will find a few wild animals pictured in this one, which of course is kind of stereotypical of what you would expect to see in a tribal book or journal. And so I've got a little bit of that influence in here, but not enough to, make it the central part of the journal. Here we've got just some random grasses and cords and things I glued together in a collage, and more African design. This was made from a stencil, putting the stencil down first and then squirting the coffee over that, and then you get a reverse type pattern. which was fun to do. So you can see this journal has a very distinctly different look and feel to it from the first two. Again, some of the wild animals. And it's very rough, and this is my wabi-sabi type of style. And I like it to look really, really random, almost like you picked it up out of a trash can, that type of feeling to it. Just real loose and grungy and fun. It just really opens up. There's no rules. You just kind of slap things down in any place. You're not looking for things to be straight or for it to be balanced or anything like that. You're just throwing it all together, real haphazard. And that's what I love about this style. Anybody can do this style because it's just, you know, just have fun and throw it down on the paper and go with it. And so I hope you see, you know, how fun a journal like this is. Here's the inside back cover, and threw in a little bit of my orange ink there, and this is what the back cover looks like. So that's a third style. And then the one I just completed looks like this. And this is a piece of sari silk. Open it up. And the cover is 300-pound watercolor. And this was taken from a much larger abstract that I had painted and did nothing with. And I cut it up, and I'm getting several covers out of that single piece of artwork. So I chose this one. I made this for the front cover, and the back cover has some gold leaf on it and gold pen and whatever. But the cover wound up being a little bit too small for the pages that I had already constructed. So I thought, well, I want to add something to beef up the size of the cover, but it has to be grungy and you know, kind of on the dark side and you know, to keep that tribal feeling alive. And so I found a table runner that I've had for years and years and never used, and it had this black kind of rough fringe along the side, so I cut it up and put that down, and then I have this fabulous, I don't know what to call it, actually it came in a ribbon roll, and it's very kind of thick but easy to cut, and I sewed that on top actually to hold it in place, and then on the inside I covered the inside with burlap, and so you see that keeps that whole feeling going of the tribal. And then my interior pages are basically from Masterboards that I created for the tribal look. I'll show you the full Masterboards in a minute, but you can see how I've incorporated them into the journal, turning them into pages and you know, just going with it again in wabi-sabi style. So you know, you just make randomness. I don't know what other adjective to use for this style, but it's just really fun to put it all together and surprise yourself and see what you come up with. So that is the one that I've just completed. So let me now quickly show you some of the actual Masterboards. They're actually not boards. Some of them are just pieces of paper. This is just, I think, a piece of copy paper that's been coffee dyed, and that's where you get that crinkly sound from. And then I use some stamps over it. So here's some of the rough, the vertical design that I did. Some polka dot. This is elongated polka dots, so you got kind of some oval there in the front, so that's computer manipulated. This was a hand-drawn design, and you can tell the hand-drawn designs, the edges are usually fairly wonky. They're definitely not straight and even, and that's an easy way to tell when something's been hand-drawn. This I made from stamps I've made. Again, this was hand-drawn and then printed. It was black on white and then printed on paper that I had pre-printed with a brown background. Same with this. The original looked more like this. We may run across the original. You can see you can reverse it on the computer and double your options. Here's one that I drew using a black pen and an orange. The orange is not a pen, it was done with a brush. Some motifs I did with a black pen. And if you need inspirations for motifs, you can, just go on the internet and hunt up tribal or African motifs or designs and get some that you can use for inspiration. This isn't one of them. It was just something I drew with the brush. And here's another one, a combination of the orange and the black, to just make a background that I could use at some point somehow. Same with this, just kind of oval shapes that are overlapping each other. And this is more of a kidney design. The black and the orange brush. So you see, you can do all kinds of things. This one's, I don't know, it started out as something and then I got carried away and hated it. But I keep it because I could make copies of this and then tear up the copies into smaller sections that would look fabulous. Here's another one. This is from stamps I've made. Another drawn, hand-drawn. This was hand-drawn. So the sky's the limit. This one got out of control as well. So did this. But you see, if you do a full page design, then you have the equivalent of a masterboard that you can use to make pages or to cut up to make smaller ephemera as you choose. Here's some motifs, kind of rock designs. Again, with the ink pens, stamps. This was computer. Here's some of my faux calligraphy done with a brush. Got several of those. This was done with a pen. Here's the original. So see, here's the original, but you can change the background and it looks completely different. These were the originals of the faux calligraphy. This is a series of brown papers that I use to create my brown backgrounds, and you can see they're, kind of grungy looking, and I love them. They're the perfect color to use in the background. Here you can see I had printed off, these were computer designs, and then I coffee dyed them. And so you get that mottled look with the coffee dyed. These two sides were just newsprint that I had off to the side of my jelly press, and when I wanted to clean my brush I would go over to those and just clean my brush off, and so that's what this is. Well, I keep those, and you don't know what you might use them for, but if you throw them away then you don't have them. So here's a collage I made out of some of my hand-drawn papers. You can see this is a Japanese calligraphy stamp there, and then we have some more tribal type designs included in there. But this was a collage, and here's another one using copies of Masterboards that I made and tearing them up and working them together to create a whole new look and feeling. Here's another one. This was actually a gel print down here. The white part was done with a stencil. Here's another one of those newsprint pieces that I wiped my not my brush, my roller. I wiped my roller off, and then here's that nice ribbon that I have that's very tribal looking. So I made a masterboard out of this, and these two sides make up 2 pages in the journal I just showed you, as does this. This was done from stamps, and here's torn pieces from ink drawings I did, and here's an unused gel plate print here. That white part was done with a stencil, and now it's on a masterboard and included in the journal I just showed you. So here is the original ink drawing that I did, and you can see how rough and textured it is. And then here's the same thing printed on tan cardstock. So look at the different feeling that you get from one to another. So learn to use different colors of stock, or change the background with, double printing, and you'd be amazed at the different options that you can create. Here's one of the ones that I had drawn and then printed it on the brown background that I had pre-printed on the paper. And this is a gel print, and I came in afterwards with small stencils and did some stenciling on top. It took me a while to remember what I had done to achieve that look. I threw it in here because it has a bit of that tribal feel to it as well. So I hope that gives you some ideas of what you can do on your own. The sky's the limit, as they say. There's just no end to what you can come up with, and then even make various options off of what you actually create to get different looks and feelings. Okay? So now I'm going to remove this, and now we'll do a little bit of drawing. Here's something I already started a little bit of, and what I'm using is calligraphy paper. This is thicker than normal calligraphy paper, and you'll find it on Amazon. It's called rice paper, sumi painting, drawing, calligraphy, block printing, and watercolors. I did go through it with the pens, so it will bleed through. I don't know if well, let me first explain. This paper has two different surfaces. On one side, which I was not using, it's smooth and has a little bit of a sheen to it. The other side is matte, and it's more like the typical calligraphy paper that you see out there. And so they say that if you, for instance, if you were pulling a print on a gel plate, if you use the shiny side, your colors will come out a little more crisp, maybe a little bit darker than if you use the matte side. I like and started out using the matte side because I'm doing something kind of tribal and therefore want it to look more grungy. But it is bleeding through, so, you know, make sure you have some underpaint paper in case, because I don't know if it bleeds through on the other side. Let's try and see. Yeah, it bleeds through on both sides depending on how much ink you throw on there. Now I have three sizes. These are the Posca pens, which a lot of artists are using. And this is a size PC 8K. And here is a 5M, which is a little smaller, and then my smallest is a 3M. There are other sizes, of course, but you should have at least 3 different sizes, and pick the sizes that are at least 2 or more sizes different from each other, so you have some, you know, obvious differences in sizes. So here is the 3M, and this has a little bit of a nib. It's sort of roundish, and so if you do it hard, it's going to come out almost like the next size up. But if you do it quickly and carefully, you're going to get a nice thinner line. And then here's the 5. This has a round nib up here, and I almost would rather it wasn't round. So you can see it is wider. And I'm not pressing as hard as I started out doing, so I'm getting less bleed through. Now here is the 8, size 8, and this has a chiseled nib. On one side it's wider, and on the other side it's narrower. So you can get 2 different thicknesses out of this one. I'm going to lay down the wide one first. And then just for fun, I'm going to put a thin one in between, just to change it up a little from what I've already done. So there's a thin line. Again, it's all just freehand. You don't use a ruler. If it's wobbly, you don't care. Now this time I'm going to use the thinner of the 2 sides. Okay, so you can see Here's the wide side, and then there's the thinner side. So now if you just keep on going with the sort of pattern that we've established, you wind up with the equivalent of a masterboard that you could use to create pages with, or to rip up and make collages out of it, or just cut it up into smaller pieces for tags or postcards, art cards, you name it. So I'm going to now just show you a few other things that I do. Here is this is an oxide spray. It's one of the tin holes, and the sprayer didn't work. So I kept it, and I use it for line making. I'll just, dip in here and even lay it down on its side to get different effects. So, you can play around with something like that and get something real thin. I also have a twig off of a tree down at the park near me, and so I will dip that into various colors of ink and use the end of the twig, and you can see I got some fainer out of there, but I did actually get 2 lengths out of that one dipping. And so however often you dip it, you're going to get, now you can obviously change directions to get different effects. Okay, so that's using a twig. Here's a small brush that I will use for calligraphy, and it's kind of stiff, so I'm going to dip that in real quick, and then we'll just kind of use the brush I got a little bit more on my brush, it'll last longer. And this is what I'll use, to get a more painterly marks. Okay? So there's many tools. You can make tools, you can buy tools to get different effects and just play around and have a lot of fun and create, whatever works for you, depending on the style of journal that you're looking to create. So, and that doesn't even delve into changing it up by using different colors. Here's that bottle of orange ink that you saw I used earlier. Ink is very expensive, and so I really haven't involved myself too much in it. You could also do the same thing with watercolors and watered down acrylics and many other things that are far less expensive. So I don't recommend you go buy a whole bunch of inks unless that's your thing. Anyway, so I hope that gives you a real good look into what you can do on the tribal theme, and I hope you learned something, got something valuable out of this, and if so, do me a favor and give the video a like and leave a comment. That helps the algorithm push it out to more people, and I'd appreciate that. And I do thank you so much for being here. I am so pleased whenever people stop by, even if it's just for a short time, and I am very grateful for that. And so that's it for this video. Thanks for being here. And this is Miss Darling calling this a wrap. Bye-bye.